Hello again. As we continue our exploration of the concept of identity, I would like to make clear some things about the process I am following in this particular concept. As you can see, there's several parts of the identity which I addressed in each video. And the idea of this, it may be linear, as in I was categorizing each part alone, but it's important to view each part alone in order to be able to understand that all of them work together to form your identity. And your personality or your likes, dislikes, and preferences are just a very small part of your identity and of the persona. In order to understand holistically the whole and how they work together, it's important to understand the parts. And even so, till this day, I don't think we are completely aware of how these parts work together, because it's not easy to observe the psyche as much as it's easier to observe, for example, the physical organs in the body. We can study the liver on its own, the pancreas on its own, the stomach on its own, and then see how they work together to form to be parts or function within the digestive system. And the psyche is not really the same way, even though we can view patterns over the human race as a whole and then group them into a certain concept like the higher self or the ego or the conscience, for example. But in reality, what we are actually observing is several ideas that are working together. And it's important to take that in mind when trying to understand your being. Basically, the idea is you are understanding part of your being, but you don't really, in a sense, know all of it. It's like putting pieces together of a puzzle. And the more you get to know things, you add to the puzzle in order to see the whole picture. The whole picture goes not just about you, but beyond you even. Because as we talked about before, everything is connected. So today I would like to address how the mind actually takes in information and then processes it in order to make a decision. And decided to now address this particular aspect of the identity. It's because now you would understand where it fits within the rest of the identity. Because this particular function or process of the mind takes from the different parts of the identity in order to form the knowledge base and how this knowledge is used in order to perceive the world. I think the best theory that addresses this issue about how we perceive information, take information, not only from our surroundings, but from within us, and then using this information to understand the world around us and to understand ourselves is the theory proposed by Carl Jung. And his particular theory about what he called types or psychological types addresses certain functions of the mind in order to be able to function in the world. And what he noticed through his extensive studies is that people tend to take in information in several ways and then use it in several ways. But yet, the way they take information and how they use it leads to certain types of thinking, which leads to certain feelings, which leads to certain behaviors. And he noticed that there are patterns, that there are some people in the world that actually use information and perceive information in the same way, which leads to similar behaviors. So when he combined the functions, which I will talk about in a bit, he was able to come up with 16 psychological types. This does not mean in a way that this is a form of categorization. I understand that, but it's not the point of it. The point is to help people understand how their mind functions. And the importance of that is that people sometimes, when they think there are some types that are more rare than other types, and when they're found in a society or in a family where their types of thinking are different, or the way they function is different than their family or the society, they tend to think there's something wrong with them. They tend to think that they need or should act like others, because ultimately part of us is social, and we learn by imitation, we learn by interaction with our environment. And when we feel that how we think and how we act are actually different than the people around us, we feel like we're alienated, and our need for belonging tends to be affected. And then sometimes we reject part of who we are and part of our processes in order to fit, quote unquote, in a society or in a family. It's important to understand that it's very essential that we don't all think the same, and that we don't all perceive information and use it in the same way. Otherwise, many things in the world would not exist, like artists and inventors, and then you have people who preserve social functions, and people who cause a reform and are more into revolutions. The dynamic of societies itself would not function properly if there weren't people who think differently or function or use the information they know or perceive around them in a different way. So we don't need to be all alike, nor is it bad to be the same. We have to understand that each of these functions have a role that is very important in our society. And to go into the theory itself, he talks about 4 functions. 2 of them are perceiving, basically take information from the environment, and 2 of them are judging. Judging, I don't mean the negative aspect of judging. I mean judging as in use this information or takes this information and makes a decision and knows what to do about the information it has perceived. And each of these 4 functions, the perceiving and the judging, have an introverted type, and there's an extroverted external type. So the 4 functions are intuition. So there's an internal intuition or introverted intuition and an extroverted intuition. And the second perceiving type is sensing. The judging types are logic. The second one is feelings. Talk about this. Intuition talks about the function of intuition, basically perceives information in a way that's still very mysterious to us, because most of it is unconscious, in the sense that because it works very holistically. If you notice, in the left brain, we tend to take information in a linear way, bit by bit, and then try to put things into different parts and categories in order to understand things. But the intuition, which more is right-brained, tends to think things all at the same time and sees the links all at the same time. So it's a pattern finder, able to see things more holistically, and it tends to use this information to predict, because when you know a pattern, you're able to predict something in the future. So people who use intuition as their main function tend to be more future-oriented, tend to see things more holistically, tends to link between ideas, whether externally or abstract ideas, and tend to be rely less on information that's taken from the senses. The senses, on the other hand, the person who uses sensing as a perceiving function tends to use their 5 senses to take in information. And people who use sensing tends to either then depend on things they've already tried and experienced, or tend to take things that are new in nature from what they see and taste or etc. So if you notice, a person who's intuitive thinks a bit differently than a person who is sensing. Now this information is then used by the judging functions to do something with it. For example, like the feeling function, which is not about exactly feeling, rather it's more about values and making decisions based on our values. This can be used externally in order to harmonize and to unite people externally, and it could be used internally by actually following our own values in what we do. And you notice, for example, people who use internal feelings tend to be more artistic in nature, because their expression of art and their thoughts and values itself takes in a certain fashion, in like poetry or sculpture or paintings. And then you have your judging which is logic, and the person tends to make decisions based on logic more. It's important to understand that we don't only have this or that. We all have these 4 functions, but we prefer one over the other, meaning one is more dominant than the other. Until now, they don't really know if that's really, we didn't find anything that's more genetic, is genetic inherited, or that it is nurture based. Rather, there seems to be something that is inborn in us where we have a preference for one or the other. And as we said before, these functions, when they combine together, they make up 16 different types of people who perceive the world and act and think in certain ways that are different than the other types. And because they act and perceive things indifferently, they tend to be more inclined towards things that are, for example, that are more logical in nature, like engineering or computer programming, or some others are more inclined towards artistic abilities, and some are more inclined to leadership abilities, etc. Why is this important? Because when you actually know what your type is, it doesn't mean you just put yourself in that type or limit yourself into that type. As I said, we have all the functions, and you can obviously improve on the other functions that are weaker in nature or not preferred. But this helps you understand how you think and how you perceive the world, and by understanding this, you know part of your role in the world and how to best use your functions in a way that is aligned with your own being. To know further about these functions, please read the book by Carl Jung called Psychological Types, and there are several other adapted from his theory, like Myers-Briggs and Scionics are all based on his theory, and there are many tests that can be found, some of them reliable and valid, which these two offer, or you can find more or less, well, not very reliable or valid, but they can give you an idea online or in books to find out what is your personality type. And then after you find what's your psychological type, read through the description and find what is very similar, or how is this what you actually do. And sometimes we find things that we are not aware that we are this particular type, or we perceived or use information this way. And this helps us understand maybe we're working in a job that we don't like because we don't really like to do this job, because it's not very motivating to us, and it's not aligned with how we view or perceive the world. And this can help you, as we talked about in the last video, in your life purpose. Next time I will talk about another theory which was very helpful in finding out what is your motivation in life. Until then, thank you for listening. Bye.